Welcome to The Kingstonian, a podcast that profiles individuals who are passionate about what they do for a living, about what organization they belong to, or simply passionate about the community they are a part of. Hello there, and welcome. My name is Dave Cunningham. We turn the tables on one of the hosts of the morning show on CJAI TV, Bill Welychka. Bill, welcome to the other side of the microphone.
Well, I spend my whole life interviewing people, so for someone to ask me questions, I've always found it a little nerve-wracking.
Well, that's what I was thinking is the me interviewing an interviewer, which is going to be a little different for both of us, I would think. Let's start with this. Almost 30 years in front of the camera, 3,000 interviews around the world. Why did you pick television as the medium to start with?
Good question. It wasn't until I was last year of high school. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and you had to pick universities or colleges, and I had no idea, and I ended up rented a video camera from the library and incorporated a video camera into my grade 13 history project, and just had a great time with it, and I figured, I like this. So I ended up going to Seneca for radio and television broadcasting, and fell in love with editing. I love the whole idea of editing, and the week I graduated from Seneca, I got hired at Much Music as an editor. The reason why I had my foot in the door there is I was volunteering at Much, dubbing their videos for Music Plus. So I was going to school during the day, going home to have a nap, and then I'd show up in the middle of the night and basically press play and record. Music Plus was broadcasting out of 299 Queen Street in Toronto. They were getting ready for their move to Montreal. And so I basically dubbed all their videos, and everything was in synchronicity. The week that Music Plus moved to Montreal was the week I graduated, was the week I got hired at Much as an editor full-time. Fell in love with country during college, realized that Much Music had all these country music videos coming in, but no avenue to play them. So I submitted a proposal for a country show, and ended up going on the air, called Outlaws and Heroes, which I edited and helped produce. The show's original host, Denise Donlin, ended up going away on mat leave. She asked me to fill in for her while she was away. And then when she came back, we co-hosted, and then she became the director of music programming. So I took over full-time as the host. And when CMT started up in Canada, back then it was called New Country Network, Much Music didn't feel that they could compete with a 90-minute weekly country show. So they canceled it and moved me over to regular flow VJing. All the while, though, I never walked away from the behind-the-scenes stuff, which I truly love. I still love editing. I still love producing. So the on-air stuff, I just sort of happened. I sort of fell into it.
It's unusual for somebody in broadcasting to start at the top, as opposed to starting in a small station and working your way to a bigger market, right?
I know it, yeah.
You started right in the top.
Yeah, I know it. My whole career's been backwards. You're right. Most people start off in a small market or a medium market, eventually work their way up to a major market. I did it backwards. I was 20 years old, starting off my first job in Toronto, and throughout my 20s, imagined to travel the world and interview everyone I've ever wanted to. And it wasn't until I was turning 30 where I realized I don't want to do this anymore. Meaning, be a VJ. I love interviewing. I love producing and creating television. That particular format, I felt I was growing out of it. Not that I stopped liking music. I still love music. But just the idea of how it was presented, I wasn't a fan of anymore. The 5-second soundbite. Who's sleeping with who is in rehab, who's got cellulite, just that whole style of entertainment. I remember coming back with a 40-minute David Bowie interview that killed, and I had to talk the boss. By then, Denise Donlin was gone. She knew music, so I really missed her. But I had to talk my new boss into letting this be an hour special, and they said, well, is it going to get ratings? I just thought, okay, I'm done. Anyway, I ended up doing it. But then an offer came to, after Much More Music, Much Music sister station, I took a job offer to do a morning show in Edmonton when they rebranded it to City TV, and just missed Ontario so much. I ended up, after a year in Edmonton, working in Ottawa at a CTV affiliate, becoming a weather anchor. So I no weather training. I just basically learned it on my own and read a lot of books. And 7 years there, and then I moved here after there was massive layoffs in Ottawa. Still massive layoffs. I'm just hearing a number of people 7 years later after I left being laid off. So I took a job offer here and loved it ever since, and realized, from a major market to a small market, the weird thing is I've never been happier.
That's great.
Go figure.
Great. Let's go back to Much Music for a second and talk about some of the people that you've interviewed. You've done 3,000 interviews all around the globe.
Yeah.
Just a couple of people that sort of highlight that part of your career for you.
It's funny, the people that I like to talk about aren't really, most people want to hear about Madonna or the Backstreet Boys or, the big pop stars. And there's a place for that, sure, but the people that I really enjoyed interviewing and actually bonded with many times are people that I grew up idolizing, and that's the members of Led Zeppelin. I've interviewed Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, Robert Plant a number of times. That's always been a huge kick. I was a huge fan of metal, so Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. I loved country. I've interviewed George Jones, Waylon Jennings, Conway Twitty, the legends. Mick Jagger, a couple of the Stones, a couple of Beatles, Robert Smith from The Cure. I've interviewed 5 or 6 times. I had a picture of Robert Smith and The Cure in my locker in high school. So any of those bands that any artist that I went home to listen to and who gave me enjoyment, and I would go see live, those were the favorites for me. That includes Ozzy, that includes Metallica, that includes even later bands like Oasis. I fell in love with Oasis for their first record, and have a chance to interview Liam and Noel Gallagher a number of times, and not just that, but coming away with great interviews was always the goal. Enjoyable interviews that they appreciated and they enjoyed as well, and that was always the goal. And I think I did that 99% of the time.
Now let's expand a little bit on that, because when I sit down and talk with someone to interview for this show, generally they are people who don't get interviewed a lot. But when you were doing those types of bands and the people in those types of bands, they would be interviewed or have been interviewed countless times. How do you make yourself stand out or get them interested in opening up to you when you sit down with them?
I think it's just a matter of them having a sense that you're not an idiot. Madonna's a great example. I've watched interviews with her or Mick Jagger where they won't give a lot in the first 5-10 minutes. And depending on the interviewer, that interviewer may walk away with not a lot of content. And I just realized, certain artists, they've been through it enough that they'll test you. And if you can go toe-to-toe, if you know what you're talking about, if you're intelligent, if you're not going to come across, ask the same question that they've been asked over and over, then they'll give you stuff. Then they'll give you good stuff. And that happened with Madonna. It happened with any difficult interviewer throughout my career. A lot of that is just, I think it's content, sure. It's things that they've never been asked for, perhaps. It's doing an awful lot of research. It's listening to a lot of music, especially if they're a songwriter. There's always interesting things that you could find in an artist's work that perhaps they've never been asked before. And that was always the goal. Yeah, it's very important.
Okay, Bill, now you've moved to Kingston. One of the reasons you came to Kingston was
to fill in hosting duties for the show Live at 5 that was on the air then. But like anything else, you do your homework before you make a huge life decision, like moving to a different city, working for a new employer. I had worked for Chum, which was an amazing company, unfortunately absorbed by CTV, Bell Globe back then. And I had never worked for Chorus Entertainment, and did my research and realized this station had been around at that point approaching 60 years, and so it was a heritage station. I had a tour of the station. I met with Jay Westman and some other big bosses here, and just got this really cool vibe from them, from the place, and the chorus values that are instilled. We didn't have values at Bell Media, and I think it's apparent to the viewer in a lot of cases. And we're seeing how many cuts across Canada from various networks across the country. And Chorus, they have this inherent support, love, and respect for their employees. Something that's very rare these days. I have a lot of people who don't work in, I know a lot of friends who don't work in the business anymore. And so I feel very fortunate all these years later that I'm still in the business and working for a company that I absolutely adore, in a place that I adore, in a city that I adore, especially a city.
We're doing a show that runs 6 to 9
in the mornings,
weekday mornings, 3 hours. So content-wise, how do you go about deciding what kind of content to put in the program?
A lot of it is just pitches that I will get, lots of emails. Kingston has such a beautiful energy in terms of, the creativity, the arts, for one. But that aside, there's just a lot of generosity here. There's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of events happening. And my goal is to just basically have some flashing lights and arrows pointing at some of these events and some of these groups that have something to say and a big difference to make. It makes my job very easy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is just emails and pitches. And I rarely have to seek out guests, which is nice. So the show pretty much produces itself. I have an easy job.
You tend to get out and do things in the community in terms of interviewing guests out there. I can think of something I noticed on your YouTube channel where you were talking about, or going to a fundraising event that involved wrestling. And interviewing some of the big wrestling stars that continue to be around.
I have a lot of weird tastes. I love music, I love pro wrestling, I love sports, I love politics, I love pop culture. I have a pretty good, well-rounded knowledge of current events, and always have. I've always been curious. So, I'm a big fan of pro wrestling. Meeting Jan Murphy here in Kingston, who is he works with the WWE and writing about the industry. So much so that he has formed Chinlock Wrestling. It's an independent wrestling promotion here in Eastern Ontario. But one of the great things that we have in common is his love of charity too. And there's a lot of independent wrestling promotions out there that will take your money and run. And Jan always believed, you're going to make money, hopefully, from an independent wrestling promotion. Do something with that money. He's never made a penny from it. Mm-hmm. He's always given back to the community after you pay the wrestlers, after you pay for the venue, for the ring, whoever, whatever. But he always maintains giving money back to charity, and it's something that I've maintained for years. My nephew plays pro hockey. He played with the London Knights and played for Belleville. He went to Carleton. And when he first got signed with the London Knights, I remember telling him, okay, you're going to have a lot of cameras on you now. You're going to be doing a lot of interviews. You have to represent something. You have to use your name and your time for good. Anyway, he's been in Denmark this year playing pro, and I noticed he launched this toy drive for the local children's hospital where he is living in Denmark. And I watched this interview he did recently, about a month ago. It was on YouTube. He goes, well, my uncle made it very important to me to give to charity and to do something for charity. And I thought, man, okay, he gets it. He gets it, yes.
He listened to me.
Yes, he listened to me. My brother called me. He goes, why didn't he mention me? I go, well, I don't know, Ed. I instilled a good message within him. Not that you didn't, but yeah. So, I'm proud of him. I think of him as my own.
There's something to be said for doing interviews in the studio or going out and doing interviews on the street, but how important is it for a television host to get physical with some of the topics that he is talking about in his interview or the guests that he is interviewing?
It's a fine line sometimes. You don't want to piss anyone off. You want to inform people. You want to sometimes, hopefully, entertain people, but it's not my job to create drama or to have an opinion one way or the other. I think it's okay to have a balancing act, But, we just went through a very divisive election. And on social media, I had friends going one way or the other, and they were fighting. They were insulting each other. And this whole idea of, well, whoever I vote for, I am right, and whoever you're voting for, if you don't agree with me, then you're wrong. That was a general attitude that I felt from a lot of people this past election, and I stayed away from it. Not that I'm not allowed to have an opinion, but there's a time and place and a way to express your opinion. And I didn't really see it a lot this last election. And you can apply that to anything.
Right. You get a lot of people approaching you about getting some time on the show to promote their particular cause. Do you have any particular causes that you are particularly close to yourself?
Mr. Cunningham, great question. Yeah, back when I was with Much, I worked with the White Ribbon Campaign when they first launched, and it was a group of men coming together to try and end men's violence against women. This movement started with a couple of guys after the Montreal Massacre in Toronto, and now it's grown to over 70 countries around the world. A lot of these countries don't even recognize women's rights. And basically it's guys getting the message out there that any kind of violence against women, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, is wrong. And I've always loved their message. I was raised by a single mom, and most of my friends are female. I've always had more female friends than I've had male friends, and I've been made to feel ashamed of my own sex a lot of times. And these group of guys come along with a message where instills a sense of pride in my sex again. We're still hearing stories. Sadly, I think we will for a long time. But it just takes one guy in a group of guys out at a bar to remind them, date, rape, drug is not cool. That joke is not cool. To stand up and have respect and show respect for women. We're all the products of mothers, and that's probably my biggest charity. A lot of my mom's sensibilities. Thankfully, I grew up with, again, being raised by a single mom. There's a different perspective you have on things, and she instilled a lot of things in me that I'm proud to carry to this day.
We talked a little bit earlier on about local television, and I'd be interested in your view as to where you see local TV going moving forward, given all the competition that's out there with satellite programs and cable and online stuff.
Well, I think 10 years ago there was a panic in the industry. It wasn't until the cable carrier started buying the channels to have content for their online platforms. A good example would be Bell having Bell Wireless and these, and phones, and now they have content for their phones using Bell Media programming. So in a lot of ways, those providers saved conventional television. We'll always have a need for local television, I think, and I've talked to people who say, well, they've cut their cable, they don't really watch local television anymore, they've cut their cable, they're getting their stuff online, their news online, and a lot of local conventional channels had to adjust and realize the digital platform is just as important as the broadcast platform. And we have online journalists now. All of our stories go up online onto our website after, and so I respond, well, if you're watching local content, yeah, I watch it online. Okay, but who's putting those stories online? They're local people coming from a local channel.
Right.
So there'll always be a need for it, and there'll always be an adjustment, and just when you think you have this figured out, something else will come along. But I think local television, local coverage will never go away.
We can talk about the news angle, but there's also the kinds of programming that you do in the morning, for instance, where you're talking to members of the community. And I've noticed that in some cases the programming moves around from the early evening to midday to early morning. Time slot for the kind of show you do, is it best slotted in a morning slot as opposed to noon hours or evenings?
Well, for live, the idea of a morning show is, people are getting ready to go to work, to go to school. They'll probably watch it in 15, 20-minute intervals, get the weather, get the latest headlines. If they have time, if it's an engaging guest, they'll sit and watch it. All that stuff goes up online after anyway. So if they miss it in the morning, they will catch it online. And same with the 6 o'clock news. The idea of a family sitting around watching the 6 o'clock news after dinner or before dinner, it does happen still, but nowhere near the numbers that it used to. And that's why the online platform is just as important as the conventional. But yeah, it is. It will all be online eventually. And I've heard from some people, and they watch for 3 hours, and they say, the morning show, and they say, well, why do you repeat yourself? And I thought, okay, well, you're not supposed to be watching for 3 hours, but thank you for watching for 3 hours, but that's why there's, some repeats in the morning show.
Looking ahead down the road, what's a dream guest that you'd like to have on your show or like to interview? Not just in Kingston, but anywhere. I
have been lucky that I have met, honestly, every person I have ever wanted to meet. Anyone else that I've ever wanted to meet, I couldn't now because they're dead. But I have, the only one I can think of perhaps is Lady Gaga. Would probably be about the only one that I haven't met that I would love to interview.
That would be an
Paul
interesting.
McCartney, too.
Yeah.
I would love to interview Paul McCartney. I've interviewed Ringo Starr. I've interviewed Pete Best. I've interviewed Julian Lennon, Sean Lennon, Yoko Ono. Never John Lennon, of course. A lot of people around the Beatles. But yeah, Paul McCartney would be a very cool one.
That would be.
I would ask him if he was aware that Ringo Starr was staring at his butt the whole time. And he'd ask me, why are you asking me that? And I'd say, because when I interviewed Ringo, I asked Ringo that how did he hear what was going on? There was no amps in those days, no monitors. Girls were screaming like they've never have before. How does he know to keep the beat? He says he'd be watching the bums of the boys in front of him. That's how he was keeping the beat. Meaning, okay, so you've been staring at Paul McCartney's ass this whole time. Interesting. Yeah.
Something no one would have ever guessed before.
Yeah.
We've run out of time on the program, and I want to thank you very much for giving us some of your day and continued success as you move forward.
I appreciate that, Dave. Thank you so much. One of the things that I haven't said I would love to express is one of the joyous things about moving to Kingston is establishing connections with the boys from the Hip again. Been interviewing them since the mid-'90s, and to call them my friends is very important to me. And I still get a kick out of seeing the boys out and about and working with them sometimes still. So I've been very blessed.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Theme music for the program is Stasis Oasis, a tune written and performed by Kingston musician Tim Aylesworth. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about any of our episodes, please send a note to the Kingstonian Podcast Facebook page. This is Dave Cunningham from Kingston, Ontario. Thank you for listening. Until next time.